A desperate mother enters a luxury restaurant begging for food for her hungry child. The millionaire, accustomed to ignoring the world around him, finds himself touched by something in this woman. What begins as an act of charity transforms into an encounter that will change their lives forever. And what happens next will leave you in tears, because there are bonds that destiny cannot ignore. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise. This will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Richard Mitchell woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning. He didn't need an alarm clock. The emptiness woke him punctually. His penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side of New York City had a view of the park, but the curtains remained perpetually closed. The photographs were all turned toward the wall. Objects remained untouched, as if waiting for the return of their rightful owners. At 48, Richard was the CEO of one of the largest construction companies in the country. His face appeared in business magazines, and his name was synonymous with corporate success. No one imagined that behind that impeccable facade of expensive suits and calculated smiles for photographers, there existed a man who no longer lived. He merely functioned. The departure of his wife Anna and his son Peter 5 years ago had transformed this once vibrant man into a shadow. An accident during a vacation trip took away everything that gave meaning to his existence. Since then, Richard had turned work into his only escape valve. Wake up, work obsessively for 14 hours, dine alone in expensive restaurants where he barely touched his food, and return home only to swallow medications that allowed him to sleep without dreaming. That September morning, the New York sky dawned, particularly blue. Richard didn't even notice. He drank his black coffee without sugar, swallowed vitamins his doctor insisted were necessary, and left for another day. His secretary, Marcy, who had been with him for 20 years, tried in vain to humanize his days. She left small motivational notes, organized lunches with old friends, suggested vacations. Richard thanked her politely and ignored each suggestion. You have the meeting with investors at 10, lunch with the mayor at noon, and the afternoon free to review the Jersey City condominium projects, Marcy informed him when he arrived at the office in Midtown. Schedule something for the afternoon. I don't need free time, he replied without raising his eyes from the documents he had already begun to analyze. Richard, it's been 3 months without even a single afternoon of rest. You need... Marcy. His voice didn't change, but there was a firmness that ended any argument. Please schedule something productive for my afternoon. In meetings, Richard was flawless. Numbers, projections, strategies. His mind worked with mathematical precision. The investors left satisfied. The mayor agreed to all the social concessions proposed for the new development on the north side. Everything functioned like a well-oiled machine with no room for emotions or unexpected events. At night, as usual, he dined alone at the Carlyle, where he had a permanently reserved table. He always ate the same dish, filet with grilled vegetables. He always drank the same wine, an Argentine Malbec. He exchanged few words with the maitre d' and none with other guests. While waiting for the dessert he rarely finished, Richard observed life happening outside through the window. Couples holding hands, families with children, young people laughing loudly. It was like watching a silent film of a reality that no longer belonged to him. He paid the generous bill, left the usual tip, and prepared for another night of medicated insomnia. As he passed through the restaurant's reception, he heard the manager arguing with someone. Normally he wouldn't pay attention, but something in the female voice made him stop. Please, I just need to speak with someone from the kitchen. Just 1 minute. Ma'am, this is a high-end establishment. We don't allow this kind of approach to our clients or staff. Richard turned and saw a young woman, no more than 25, in simple but clean clothes. In her arms, wrapped in a blue blanket worn from use, a baby slept deeply. Is there a problem, Carl? Richard asked the manager, who immediately changed. His posture. No, Mr. Mitchell, this lady is being escorted out. She won't disturb you. The young woman looked directly at Richard. Her brown eyes showed no supplication, but wounded dignity. I just wanted to know if the kitchen has any leftover food. My son hasn't eaten since last night. There was something about this woman that didn't fit the stereotype the manager was trying to impose. Her clothes were simple but clean. Her posture was upright. Her voice educated. The baby, although asleep, was clean and well cared for within the limits of possibility. "Come with me," Richard said, surprising himself. Ignoring the manager's astonished look, he led the young woman to his table. The gesture attracted curious glances and some disapproving murmurs. Richard had never broken his routine, much less to bring a clearly resourceless stranger to New York's most exclusive restaurant. "Sit down," he indicated the chair across from him. "Order whatever you want for yourself and your son." The young woman hesitated, but the fatigue was visible on her face. "My name is Lucy," she said, sitting down carefully so as not to wake the baby. "And this is Michael." "Richard Mitchell," he replied, realizing it was the first time in years he had introduced himself to someone new without mentioning his position or company. Lucy ordered just a simple plate of rice, beans, and chicken, nothing from the sophisticated menu the restaurant offered. She ate slowly, savoring each forkful as if it were a rare delicacy. The baby woke up during the meal. He had large, curious eyes and didn't cry at the strange environment. He just observed everything with an unusual serenity for his age. "He's 1 year and 2 months old," Lucy explained, noticing Richard's gaze. "He's a very calm baby, thank God. Makes our life easier." Where do you live?" Richard asked, trying not to sound invasive. "We're temporarily without a fixed address," she responded, with a dignity that disconcerted him. "We left Hartford 3 weeks ago. Things didn't work out as we expected in New York." Richard realized she used carefully chosen words, avoiding terms like homeless or street. There was an education in her way of speaking that didn't match her current situation. "What did you do in Hartford?" "I was a literature teacher at St. Clair Academy. I taught high school." She smiled briefly. "The students complained when I assigned Moby Dick. They said it was too depressing." Something moved inside Richard. Anna, his wife, had also been a literature teacher. She loved Melville and used to read passages aloud while he pretended disinterest, but secretly loved hearing her. "Why did you leave there?" he asked, trying to push away the memory. Lucy's face hardened slightly. "Complicated family matters. I prefer not to talk about it." She finished eating, and to Richard's surprise, asked for a container to take what was left. "For tomorrow," she explained simply. "You never know when we'll get our next meal." That phrase, said without self-pity, just as a statement of harsh reality, hit Richard like a punch. He who wasted food every night, who had 3 empty properties besides his penthouse, who accumulated money without any purpose, felt a deep shame. "Where will you spend the night?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "We found a safe place. Near the park. There's an overhang that protects from the rain." Richard took a card from his pocket and wrote something on the back. "I have an empty apartment in Brooklyn Heights. It's nothing special, but it has hot water, a bed, and a refrigerator. No one has used it for years." He extended the card with the address and a key he always carried on his keychain. "Stay as long as you need." Lucy looked at the card as if it were a trap. "Why? You don't know me." "I can't explain," Richard answered honestly. "Maybe because your son reminds me of someone." She hesitated, but the thought of a night in a real bed for her son overcame her distrust. She accepted the card and the key, thanked him for the meal, and left with Michael in her arms, promising to return the key when she found a permanent place. Richard remained seated for a long time after she left. Something had changed in the air around him. A small crack had appeared in the isolation dome he had built around himself. That night, for the first time in 5 years, he didn't take his sleeping medication, and also for the first time he dreamed without nightmares. The next morning, Richard woke up restless. The encounter with Lucy and Michael had disturbed his carefully constructed routine. As he prepared for work, he found himself wondering if they had really gone to the apartment, if the bed was in usable condition, if there was enough food in the pantry. "Ridiculous," he muttered to himself while adjusting his tie. "I barely know them." At the office, Marcy immediately noticed the difference. Did something happen? You seem different today. Different how? Richard asked, taking the agenda she handed him. I'm not sure exactly. Less automatic. Richard ignored the comment and immersed himself in work. But unlike other days, he couldn't maintain his usual concentration. His mind constantly returned to the small apartment in Brooklyn Heights, a property he had bought as an investment and never bothered to rent or sell. At 3 in the afternoon, something unprecedented happened. Richard gathered his things and announced he was leaving early. Are you sick? Marcy asked, genuinely concerned. No, I just need to check on a property. The Mijou apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old but well-maintained building on Riverside Drive. When Richard arrived, he hesitated before knocking. What would he say? Why was he there? He took a deep breath and knocked 3 times. The door opened slowly and Lucy appeared, visibly surprised. Richard? I wasn't expecting you. Sorry for coming without notice. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay with the apartment. Everything's perfect, thank you. Would you like to come in? The 750-square-foot apartment was surprisingly clean and organized. Richard noticed that Lucy had improvised a small play area for Michael, with cushions and children's books she had probably found on the shelves. Your son, is he okay? He's sleeping in the bedroom. Finally, a peaceful nap in a real bed. She smiled, and Richard noticed how that smile transformed her face. Would you like some coffee? It's the least I can offer. Seated at the kitchen table with coffee cups between them, an awkward silence settled. Lucy was the one who broke it. Why did you really come? I'm sure it wasn't to check the condition of the apartment. Richard looked out the window that offered a glimpse of the Brooklyn Bridge. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because you and your son are the first unscheduled thing that's happened in my life in the last 5 years. Lucy studied him for a moment. You mentioned yesterday that my son reminded you of someone. Richard felt his chest tighten, but something compelled him to continue. I had a son, Peter. He would be 10 now. Lucy didn't ask what had happened. She just nodded, understanding the use of the past tense. Michael doesn't have a father either, she said simply. It's just been the 2 of us since he was born. And your family in Hartford? A flash of pain crossed Lucy's face. My parents kicked me out when they found out about the pregnancy. I'm an only child and they had other plans for me. Michael's father was a fellow teacher. When I told him about the pregnancy, he simply disappeared, requested a transfer to another city, and yet you decided to have the baby. It was never a question for me. From the first moment, it was Michael and me against the world. She took a sip of coffee. I managed to keep my job until the 6th month, living in a boarding house. After that, the school dismissed me due to moral issues. Imagine that in the 21st century. Richard felt an unexpected anger toward people he didn't even know. And how did you end up in New York? A former student told me about a social project that helped single mothers. I came here full of hope, but when I arrived, I discovered the project had lost its funding and closed. I tried other jobs, but without a fixed address and with a baby, well, you can imagine. A soft cry came from the bedroom. Lucy rose immediately. Excuse me, I need to check on Michael. She returned carrying the freshly awakened baby, with dark hair and rosy cheeks. The boy looked at Richard with curiosity, without fear. This is the man who helped us, Michael, Lucy said softly. Say hi to Mr. Richard. To Richard's surprise, the baby smiled and extended his little arms toward him. Something primitive and long dormant awakened in his chest. Hesitantly, he accepted the baby in his arms. He likes you, Lucy commented, surprised. He's usually shy with strangers. Richard felt the warmth of the small body, the delicate weight of innocent trust. Michael played with the button on his shirt, completely at ease. Do you need anything? Food, clothes, anything for the baby? You've already done more than enough by giving us a roof, Lucy responded firmly. We didn't come to ask for continuous charity. As soon as I get a job, I'll pay rent or look for another place. You're a teacher. What do you think about giving private lessons while looking for something permanent? I know several families who would pay well for a qualified teacher. Lucy's eyes sparkled. That would be perfect. I can start immediately. I'll make some contacts today. When Richard left the apartment 2 hours later, he felt strangely energized. In the elevator, he realized he had spent the entire afternoon without thinking about work, without checking emails, without the oppressive sensation that constantly accompanied him. On the way home, he stopped at a store and bought something he hadn't bought in 5 years, a gift, a small stuffed dinosaur for Michael. In the following weeks, an unexpected routine was established. Richard secured 3 private students for Lucy, children of partners and executives from his company who needed reinforcement in literature and writing. The lessons took place in the students' homes, and Lucy could bring Michael, as the families didn't mind the baby's presence. Richard began to visit the apartment regularly, always with the excuse of bringing something: a children's book for Michael, special ingredients for Lucy to cook, a new lamp for the bedroom. Each visit became longer than the previous one. Sometimes he had dinner with them, surprising himself with the pleasure he found in the simple meals prepared by Lucy, so different from the sophisticated and tasteless dishes he consumed in expensive restaurants. Marcy, his secretary, noticed the change. Richard left the office punctually at 6, refused commitments on weekends, and occasionally smiled for no apparent reason while reading messages on his phone. "Who is she?" Marcy asked one day, with the intimacy of someone who had known him for decades. "What are you talking about?" "Richard, I've worked with you for 20 years. I know that expression. It's the same one you had when you met Anna." The name of his wife, which normally paralyzed him, didn't cause the usual pain. Richard realized this with a mixture of surprise and guilt. "It's complicated, Marcy. It's not what you're thinking." But it was complicated in ways that even he didn't understand. Lucy wasn't just an attractive woman. She was a force of nature, intelligent, resilient, dedicated to her son, with an intensity that fascinated him. And Michael, the boy had found a direct path to his armored heart. On a Friday night, Richard arrived at the apartment with a bottle of wine and ingredients to prepare the pasta that Anna had taught him to make. He found Lucy agitated, walking back and forth, with Michael in her arms. "What happened?" "He's had a fever since the afternoon, 101.3 degrees. I gave him the medicine I had, but it hasn't gone down much." Richard touched the baby's forehead. It was hot, and the boy, normally so active, was listless, with glazed eyes. "Let's take him to the hospital right now." At St. Luke's Hospital, one of the most prestigious in the city, Lucy sat in the pediatric emergency room reception while Richard parked the car. When he returned, he found her still waiting, with Michael crying weakly in her arms. "No one has seen you yet?" "The receptionist said there are more urgent cases, and she asked for my health insurance." Lucy lowered her eyes. "When I said I didn't have any, she directed me to the public assistance line." Richard felt his blood boil. He went to the reception desk and used a tone he rarely employed. "My friend's son needs immediate attention. I'll pay privately." The receptionist looked from the man in the impeccable suit to the young woman in simple clothes with a baby in her arms, and her look made clear her interpretation of the situation. Nevertheless, she arranged an intake form. After examinations, the pediatrician diagnosed a throat infection that had worsened. Michael would need to be hospitalized to receive intravenous antibiotics and be monitored. "Will he be okay?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling. "If you had waited longer, it could have been serious. But now he's in good hands," the doctor assured, signing the admission. In the hospital room, after Michael finally fell asleep with the IV dripping slowly, Lucy collapsed into an armchair, exhausted. "You should go home and rest," she said to Richard. "You've already done too much for us today." "I'm not going anywhere," he replied, sitting beside her. They remained silent for some time, watching the baby sleep. The intimacy forced by the situation created a space for truths that might not have emerged under normal circumstances. Why are you doing all this for us, Richard? The truth. He looked at his own hands, surprising himself with the answer that emerged. Because you make me feel alive again. The next morning, while Lucy was in the bathroom, a nurse entered to check Michael's vital signs. She looked at Richard, who was holding the baby's hand, and smiled. Your son is very strong. The fever has gone down considerably. Richard didn't correct the mistake. For the first time in years, he felt complete again. By noon, when Michael was already showing clear signs of improvement, playing animatedly with the stuffed dinosaur he no longer let go of, a commotion began in the hallway. Richard went out to check and found several hospital employees whispering and looking at the room. One of them held a cell phone, showing something to colleagues. Upon seeing Richard, they quickly moved away. What's going on? He asked a nurse. Mr. Mitchell, haven't you seen social media today? Richard took out his own phone and opened the app he rarely used. In his timeline, he saw the photo. Him, Lucy and Michael at the hospital. The image had been taken when they were distracted, probably by some staff member. The caption read, "Billionaire businessman Richard Mitchell, widower for 5 years, appears with new family. Who is the mysterious woman?" The news was spreading rapidly, with comments ranging from curiosity to cruel judgment. Some speculated that Lucy was an opportunist who had gotten pregnant to hook a rich man. Others romanticized the situation as a modern fairy tale. When he returned to the room and showed Lucy, she turned pale. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Ignore it. Tomorrow they'll have something else to talk about. But he was wrong. By the next morning, the story had grown. The sensationalist journalist had published an article insinuating that Lucy was a con artist who had planned everything, from the casual encounter at the restaurant. Someone had discovered she was a teacher and questioned how an educated professional could be asking for food in restaurants. When they were discharged, they found photographers waiting at the hospital exit. Richard protected Lucy and Michael with his body, quickly leading them to the car. At the apartment, Lucy was devastated. This will affect your reputation, your work. People will think I'm a gold digger, that I used my son to manipulate you. Let them think that. I don't care. But I do. Tears streamed down Lucy's face. I don't want Michael to grow up being pointed at as the con artist's son. I don't want you to be harmed because of us. She began to collect the few clothes and belongings, putting them in a backpack. What are you doing? Richard asked, alarmed. I need to go. It was a mistake to think that I could. Lucy, please, let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You have your life, your company, your reputation. We are a side chapter that's complicating everything. She finished packing the backpack, picked up Michael, who was watching the scene without understanding, and walked to the door. Where are you going? Richard asked, desperate. It's better you don't know. Thank you for everything, Richard, really. And before he could stop her, Lucy left, taking Michael and leaving behind only the familiar emptiness that Richard so feared. In the days that followed Lucy and Michael's departure, Richard sank into an even deeper torpor than before. The Brooklyn Heights apartment, where he had left the door unlocked in hope of a return, remained empty. His calls to Lucy's cell phone went straight to voicemail. At work, rumors circulated about his involvement with a con artist and her alleged son. Investors asked veiled questions about his emotional stability. The press continued to speculate, now about the whereabouts of the mysterious woman who had disappeared as quickly as she had appeared. You need to make an official statement, Richard, Marcy insisted a week later. The rumors are affecting the company's stock. To hell with the stocks, he replied without energy. It's not just that. Some people are looking for information about the young woman. They want to turn this into an even bigger scandal. Richard looked out his office window. Outside, New York City continued its frantic routine, indifferent to the emptiness he felt. Marcy, could you locate someone who doesn't want to be found? His secretary smiled for the first time in days. That's what 20 years of contacts are for, isn't it? 3 days later, Marcy entered his office with a triumphant expression. I found her. She's in a shelter for single mothers in Queens, a place run by nuns. Apparently she got a job at a nearby public school, but still can't afford to rent. A place just for her and her son. Richard took the address and was about to rush out when Marcy stopped him. "Before you go, there's an interview scheduled for today. That GNN journalist who's been insisting for weeks. I've cancelled twice, but they threatened to do a speculative piece if you continue to avoid them." "Marcy, this can wait. I need to find Lucy first." "The interview is live, Richard. In 1 hour. If you don't show up, they'll speculate even more about your mental state and the whereabouts of that young woman." Richard hesitated. An idea began to form in his mind. "Confirm the interview, but first I need you to do something." An hour later, Richard was in the GNN studios. The journalist, known for her incisive style, began with questions about business, future projects, the impact of the economy on the construction company's ventures. Richard responded mechanically, his thoughts elsewhere. "Now, Mr. Mitchell, I can't help but ask about the recent events in your personal life. The photos that circulated showing you with a young woman and a baby in the hospital generated a lot of speculation. Could you clarify this situation?" It was the cue he had been waiting for. "I can, Renata. In fact, I'd like to use this opportunity to speak directly to America, if you'll allow me." The journalist, sensing the potential for a bombshell moment, nodded enthusiastically. Richard looked directly into the camera. "5 years ago, I lost my wife, Anna, and my son, Peter, in an accident. Since then, I've been living like a walking dead man, working obsessively, existing without really living, until a few weeks ago I met Lucy and her son, Michael." He paused, searching for the right words. "Lucy is not what they're saying out there. She's a brilliant teacher who faced difficult circumstances with a dignity few would have. Her son, Michael, is a miracle of joy in a world that tries to crush people like her every day." The journalist tried to interrupt, but Richard continued. "No, we are not romantically involved, as many speculated, but they gave me something I had lost: hope. The ability to feel something beyond pain." His voice broke slightly. "Lucy, if you're watching, I want you to know that your friendship and Michael's mean more to me than any business, any contract, any fortune. I'm not trying to replace anyone, neither my lost family nor Michael's absent father. I'm just asking for the chance to build something new, something true, regardless of what others think or say." The journalist, visibly moved, tried to regain control of the interview. "Mr. Mitchell, that's a very personal statement. Are you aware that millions of people are watching?" "I am, and I hope that among those millions is a young mother who taught me more about courage in a few weeks than I learned in my entire life." In the small room of the shelter in Queens, Lucy watched the interview on an old television in the community room, with Michael asleep in her arms. Silent tears streamed down her face as she listened to Richard's words. One of the nuns, Sister Connie, sat beside her. "Is that the man you talked about?" Lucy nodded, unable to speak. "He seems sincere," the elderly nun commented, "and he's clearly suffering without you two." "I'm afraid, Sister. Afraid of what people will say, what they'll think. Afraid that Michael will grow up being judged for something we didn't do." The nun took Lucy's hands in her wrinkled ones. "My child, I've spent 60 years in this shelter. You know what I've learned? That the judgment of others is like rain on a tin roof. It makes noise, but it passes. What remains is what we build with true love." That night, as she put Michael to bed, Lucy heard a commotion in the shelter's courtyard. Looking out the window, she saw Richard talking with Sister Connie. He was carrying a cardboard box and looked nervous. When she came down the stairs and found him in the courtyard, lit only by a dim lamp, she felt as if something finally clicked into place in her dislocated world. "You came," she said simply. "I would come to the end of the world." He replied, "I brought something for you too." From the box, he took out Michael's old stuffed dinosaur, now clean and with a small bandage on its arm. "He was missing his owner," Richard explained, "and so was I." Michael, whom Lucy carried in her arms, extended his little arms toward the toy, babbling happily. "I brought something else too," Richard continued, taking an envelope from the box. "A formal proposal from my company to create a scholarship and employment program for single mothers. And I want you to be the project director." Lucy took the envelope, astonished. Why? Because you made me realize there are invisible people. To those living in the bubble of privilege, brilliant, talented people who just need a fair opportunity. And because, he hesitated briefly, because I want to build something meaningful with you two, whether as a friend, partner, or whatever destiny determines. That night, for the first time in weeks, Michael slept peacefully in an improvised room at the shelter, hugging his favorite dinosaur. And in the courtyard, under the stars of the New York sky, Lucy and Richard talked until dawn, rebuilding bridges that seemed irrevocably burned. 3 months passed since the reconciliation at the shelter. Lucy had accepted Richard's proposal and now directed the newly created New Beginnings project, an initiative of Mitchell Construction to offer temporary housing, professional training, and scholarships for single mothers in vulnerable situations. The program already served 20 families and received praise from the press that had previously speculated about their relationship. Lucy and Michael had returned to the Brooklyn Heights apartment, but the relationship with Richard remained in an undefined limbo. They had dinner together almost every night, spent weekends at the park or beach with Michael, shared books, movies, and long conversations. To any outside observer, they were a family, but neither Richard nor Lucy dared to name what they felt for each other. Michael, now almost 2 years old, was the only one who had no doubts about his feelings. For him, Uncle Chard, as he called Richard, was a constant and beloved presence, almost a father figure. On a particularly busy Thursday, Lucy was at the project office when she received an unexpected call. "Lucy Montgomery?" asked an unknown male voice. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Edward Vieira, director of St. Clair Academy in Hartford." Lucy felt her stomach sink. St. Clair Academy, where she had worked before the pregnancy, which had dismissed her for moral issues. "How can I help you?" "We learned about your work in New York through the report in Time magazine. We were impressed by your trajectory." "Impressed now that I'm associated with a well-known name, I imagine," Lucy responded, unable to contain the bitterness. "We deserve that," the director admitted, surprising her. "Actually, I'm calling to offer a formal apology from the school and an invitation for you to return to our faculty with a position as pedagogical coordinator." The proposal was tempting, a salary much higher than what she earned before, the possibility of implementing innovative educational projects, and the professional recognition she had always desired. Hartford also meant going back near her parents, the possibility of a family reconciliation, of giving Michael a relationship with the grandparents he had never known. "I need to think," she answered honestly. "My life is established in New York now. I understand. But know that the offer is open. We sincerely hope to repair our error in judgment." When she hung up, Lucy stared at the wall, lost in thought. The opportunity seemed professionally perfect. It was recognition of her value. As an educator, not as Richard Mitchell's protégé, it would be the chance to show her parents that she had rebuilt herself through her own merit, that she had raised her son with dignity despite their abandonment. But it would mean leaving Richard behind, leaving this almost relationship, this almost family they had built in recent months. That night, after putting Michael to bed, Lucy told Richard about the proposal. "That's wonderful," he said, genuinely happy for her. "It's the recognition you deserve." "Do you think I should accept?" A shadow passed over his eyes, but his smile didn't falter. "It's your decision, Lucy. I know how much your career means to you, how much you want to prove your worth independently of any help from me." "It's not just that," she admitted. "It would also be a chance to bring Michael closer to my parents. They've never met him. The same parents who kicked you out when you needed them most." Richard's voice had an unusual hardness. "People make mistakes, Richard. You, more than anyone, should understand the value of second chances." The silence that followed was dense with unspoken meanings. Finally, Richard spoke. "You're right. If you want to go, I'll support your decision." The Brooklyn Heights apartment. Will always be yours if you need to come back, and the project can be managed remotely if you want to continue. The formality in his voice was like an invisible wall rising between them. Lucy realized he was already preparing for the separation, already beginning to rebuild the defenses that she and Michael had torn down. Richard, Lucy's cell phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was an unknown number. Hello. Lucy, a female voice, trembling and elderly. This is Cindy, your great-aunt. Aunt Cindy, what happened? Lucy hadn't spoken with her aunt since before the pregnancy. She was the only relative who had tried to intercede on her behalf when her parents expelled her. It's your Uncle Joe, he had a stroke. He's very bad, dear. He's asking to see you. Uncle Joe, the man who had practically raised her while her parents worked, who told her stories, who took her fishing, who taught her to ride a bike. The same one who remained silent the day her father kicked her out of the house. Where are you? At St. Teresa Medical Center in Hartford. The doctors don't know if he'll make it, honey. 2 hours later, Lucy was in a car with Richard and Michael heading to Hartford. They had hastily packed a small bag, and Richard had insisted on driving, personally, refusing to let her go alone in that emotional state. At the hospital, they found Aunt Cindy in the waiting room, a 70-year-old lady, bent by the weight of worry. Upon seeing Lucy, she opened her trembling arms. My girl, she sobbed, hugging her tightly. Then she saw Michael asleep in Richard's arms. And this is my son, Michael. Lucy took the baby from Richard. And this is Richard, a very special friend. The elderly woman's eyes moved from one to the other, understanding the hesitation in the introduction. She nodded slightly to Richard. Your uncle is in the ICU. They only allow one visitor at a time for a few minutes. Lucy handed Michael back to Richard. Can you take care of him while I go in? Of course. Take as long as you need. In the ICU, Uncle Joe was connected to several machines. His once robust and strong figure seemed to wither between the white sheets. Upon seeing Lucy, his eyes filled with tears. Forgive a foolish old man, were his first words, weak and broken. I should have defended you. Lucy held his hand, feeling the prominent veins under the thin skin. It's okay, Uncle, I'm here now. No, it's not, I need to tell you. He paused, struggling to breathe. About your parents, about you. The heart monitor accelerated, and a nurse quickly entered, asking Lucy to leave. The doctor needed to examine the patient. In the waiting room, she found Richard cradling Michael, who had woken up crying. He had managed to calm him down, and now the boy was sleeping again in his arms. The scene made her heart ache. Aunt Cindy approached, offering coffee. Your friend is very good with children, she commented, looking at Richard. He's amazing with Michael. Better than me sometimes. You make a beautiful family, the elderly woman said simply. We're not a family, Aunt, just we help each other. The old woman smiled with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long time. When your uncle and I met, I worked as a maid in his parents' house. He was the boss's son, studying medicine. Everyone said it was madness, that we would never work out, that I just wanted a good catch. 60 years later, here we are. Lucy looked at Richard, who was softly humming to Michael, completely unaware of the conversation. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where the three of them were truly a family. The doctor came out of the ICU with a grave expression. We've managed to stabilize him, but the situation is delicate. He needs absolute rest. Can I see him again? Lucy asked. Tomorrow. For today, he needs to rest. I suggest you also rest and return in the morning. At Aunt Cindy's house, a simple 2-story home in Hartford's historic center, Richard settled Michael into an improvised bed. The boy slept deeply, exhausted by the trip and the break in routine. You must be tired too, Richard said to Lucy. I'll look for a hotel nearby and come back to pick you up early tomorrow. No, Lucy held his arm. Stay here. Aunt Cindy has already prepared the guest room for us. For us? Richard repeated, uncertain. For our family, Lucy answered, finally, pronouncing the word they both avoided. Even if we don't yet know exactly what that means. That night, Lying in a narrow twin bed with Michael sleeping in an improvised crib beside them, Richard held Lucy's hand in the dark. "I'm afraid," he confessed in a whisper. "Afraid of losing you two like I lost Anna and Peter. Afraid of not being enough. And I'm afraid of depending on someone again," she replied, "of trusting and being abandoned, like I was by Michael's father, by my parents, by the school." In the silence that followed, only the sound of Michael's peaceful breathing filled the room. It was the most perfect sound in the world. The next morning, they found Uncle Joe awake and slightly stronger. The doctor allowed a longer visit, as long as they didn't agitate him. Lucy entered the room carrying Michael, who looked curiously at the white-haired gentleman in the bed. "So this is little Michael," Uncle Joe said with a weak voice but bright eyes. "He has the same eyes as his mother when she was little." Lucy sat in the chair beside the bed with Michael in her lap. The boy, normally shy with strangers, smiled at the old man, as if recognizing something familiar in him. "Uncle, yesterday you wanted to tell me something about my parents." The old man nodded, breathing deeply. "Lucy, there's something you don't know about your history, something your parents hid all their lives and that I, cowardly, also hid." He paused, as if gathering strength. "Your parents are not your biological parents. You were adopted when you were just 3 days old." The revelation fell like lightning upon Lucy. Her entire world seemed to spin for a moment. "What? But how? Why did they never tell me?" "Your biological mother was very young, almost a girl. She was the daughter of a family friendly with your parents. When she became pregnant, the family sent her away to avoid scandal, exactly as your parents did with you." Lucy felt vertigo, the story repeating itself like a family curse. "Who was she?" "My biological mother. Helen Montgomery." "Montgomery? But that's my last name." "Yes. Your adoptive parents kept your original surname as a condition of the adoption. It was the only request Helen made, that you keep your identity, even if you didn't know the truth." Michael stirred in Lucy's lap, sensitive to his mother's agitation. She settled him better, trying to absorb what she had just heard. "Helen tried to find you when you were about 10 years old. She had recovered, built a life. She wanted to at least meet her daughter, even if from afar. Your parents refused." "Is she still alive?" Lucy asked, a thread of hope in her voice. The old man lowered his eyes. "No. She passed away 12 years ago in a car accident. But before she left something for you." He weakly pointed to the nightstand. "In the bottom of the second drawer, a wooden box." Lucy found the small carved box, the size of a book. Inside was a letter yellowed by time, some photographs, and a sealed manila envelope. "She gave this to me to keep, to give to you when you were old enough to understand. But your parents forbade me. When I learned of your pregnancy, I thought about looking for you, delivering the box, but I was a coward, afraid of your father's reaction." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because life is too short for secrets. Because you deserve to know who you are, and because," he looked at Michael, "some stories need to be interrupted before they repeat." With trembling hands, Lucy opened the letter. The handwriting was delicate, but firm. "My dear daughter, if you are reading this, it's because you have finally learned the truth about your birth. I don't know how old you are now, nor how your life has been. I hope from the bottom of my heart that you have been loved and happy. I was only 16 when you were born, too young, without resources, without support. Your grandparents sent me away to a convent where I stayed until you were born. I wanted to keep you, fight for you, but they gave me no choice. In the brief moments I held you in my arms, I promised that one day we would meet again, that you would know the truth, that you would understand I didn't abandon you for lack of love, but for lack of options. The envelope accompanying this letter contains something that by right is yours, an inheritance from your maternal grandmother, who left it to me on the condition it would be yours one day. I hope it helps you build the future you choose, not the one others determine for you. Wherever I may be when you read this, know that I loved you from the first moment, and that my greatest desire is for you to live free from the chains that bound me. With eternal love, Helen, your mother." Tears flowed freely down Lucy's face as she opened the manila envelope. Inside were bank documents, property titles, and a savings account statement with a value that made her gasp. "This is the inheritance Helen left for you," Uncle Joe confirmed. "Your maternal grandmother was a woman of means and left everything to Helen with the condition that part would be saved for you. Helen kept the promise even without being able to be near." Michael, sensing his mother's emotion, touched her tear-wet face, babbling something incomprehensible, but full of concern. "It's okay, my love," Lucy reassured him, hugging him tightly. "Mummy's just emotional." Uncle Joe observed the scene with moist eyes. "Your heart is as big as hers. Seeing you with your son is like seeing Helen again. The same strength, the same unconditional love." Lucy looked at the photographs. In one of them, a young woman who looked very much like her smiled, holding a newborn baby. On the back, the date and a simple inscription, "Lucy, my miracle. 05/12/12 1995. Why did my adoptive parents react so badly to my pregnancy? They, more than anyone, should have understood. Perhaps out of fear that you would repeat Helen's story. Or perhaps," the old man hesitated, "perhaps out of fear that, becoming a mother, you would discover the truth about being a daughter." Lucy carefully put the letter and photos back in the box, but kept the documents in hand. Her world had been turned upside down, but strangely, she felt more complete than ever, as if a piece that had always been missing in her internal puzzle finally fit. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Uncle, even if it took time. Will you forgive a foolish old man? Only if you promise to get better soon. Michael needs to properly meet his great-granduncle." Outside the room, Richard waited patiently. When Lucy came out, he immediately saw that something had changed. She seemed lighter and at the same time stronger. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concerned. "It will be," she replied. "I need to tell you something important." In the hospital cafeteria, while Michael played with a toy car that Richard had bought in the gift shop, Lucy told the whole story. The revelation about her adoption, the biological mother she never knew, the inheritance that was now legally hers. "It's as if my whole life was built on a false story," she concluded, "and at the same time it's as if I finally understand why I always felt different." Richard held her hands across the table. "What will you do now?" "First, I need to decide about the school's proposal. With these resources, I can accept or refuse without financial concerns. I could even open my own school if I wanted. And your adoptive parents, will you look for them?" Lucy was silent for a moment, watching Michael, who was now offering the car to a smaller child. "At the next table. Yes, not for me, but for Michael. He deserves to know all his grandparents, even those who made mistakes." "And what about us?" Richard asked, finally verbalizing the question that had been hanging between them for months. Lucy looked at him, really looked. She saw the man, who had transformed his pain into purpose, who had opened not only his home but his heart to her and Michael, who had respected her limits, her hesitations, her scars. "That depends," she answered. "Are you willing to build something real, Richard? Not just a replacement for what you lost, but something completely new?" "It's what I've been trying to do since you walked into the Carlisle that night," he answered with sincerity. "But I'm scared, Lucy. Scared of not being able to be what you and Michael deserve. I'm scared too. Scared of trusting, of giving myself again. But I think it's time we face those fears together." Michael returned to the table, extending his arms to Richard, who picked him up naturally. The boy rested his head on Richard's shoulder, as if that were his natural place in the world. "Chad," he babbled sleepily, his childish version of Richard that curiously sounded like God. "He needs a father," Lucy said softly, "and I need a partner who understands that my dreams and my independence are as important as our feelings." "I would never ask you to give up who you are, Lucy. It's exactly that strength, that determination, that made me love you." It was the first time either of them had used the word. It hung in the air between them, delicate and powerful at the same time. "Then that's what we'll build," Lucy finally said. "A family based on choices, not obligations, on freedom, not dependence." That night, on the way back to New York, with Michael sleeping in the back seat and Helen's box in the trunk, Lucy looked out the window at the Hartford Mountains, receding in the distance. She finally felt ready to write her own story, on her own terms. Richard drove in silence, respecting her moment of reflection. When he took her hand on the gear shift, Lucy didn't pull away. It was the first step of a new journey. 6 months passed since the revelations in Hartford. Life had changed dramatically for Lucy, Michael, and Richard, but in ways none of them could have predicted. Uncle Joe recovered slowly from the stroke and, to everyone's surprise, was the catalyst for a family reconciliation. One Sunday afternoon, he insisted on a lunch where Lucy's adoptive parents were present. The meeting was initially tense, full of uncomfortable silences and furtive glances at Michael, who innocently ran around the house. "He has your eyes," Lucy's mother finally said, breaking the ice. "The same eyes that enchanted me when I first saw you at the orphanage." The conversation that followed was painful, with tears on both sides. Her parents confessed the fear they felt when they saw her pregnant, fear that she would repeat Helen's story, fear that she would suffer the same difficulties, fear that she would blame them for having hidden the truth for so long. "We thought we were protecting you," her father explained, his voice breaking, "but we ended up hurting you even more." It wasn't an immediate or easy forgiveness, but it was a beginning. The broken bridge began to be rebuilt, one plank at a time. With the resources from Helen's inheritance, Lucy decided not to accept the position in Hartford. Instead, she expanded the New Beginnings project to include a school specifically aimed at young mothers, where they could study while their children received quality care and early childhood education. The school, named Helen Montgomery Institute, quickly became a model of inclusion and social support. Richard, in turn, made radical changes in his life. He reduced his workload, delegated responsibilities, and began to dedicate himself to social housing projects. Mitchell Construction, previously known only for luxury developments, was now a reference in sustainable and accessible projects. As for them, as a couple, things evolved naturally. Richard began to frequent the Brooklyn Heights apartment more and more, until, without a formal decision, his clothes began to occupy the closet, his books the shelves, his toiletries the bathroom. They began to alternate weekends between the apartment and his penthouse on the Upper East Side, which now had the curtains always open and Michael's toys scattered around the corners. On a particularly beautiful Saturday afternoon, Richard invited Lucy and Michael for a picnic at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The place was special to them. It had been where they spent their first day together as an almost family, when Michael took his first firm steps, walking awkwardly between the two. Under the shade of a centuries-old tree, with Michael chasing butterflies a few meters away, Richard took a small box from his pocket. "I have something for you," he said, handing it to Lucy. She opened the box, expecting to find a ring, but instead there was a key. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "The key to our new home," he replied with a nervous smile. "A home that isn't mine or yours, a home for the three of us. If you want, of course." Lucy held the key, turning it between her fingers, feeling its symbolic weight. "Is this a marriage proposal disguised as a change of address?" she teased, but her eyes sparkled with emotion. "Actually," Richard called Michael, who came running. The boy, now almost 2.5 years old, carried something in his closed little hands. "Michael has something to give you." The boy opened his hands in front of his mother, revealing a small velvet box. "Mommy, open," he asked, with still imperfect but understandable pronunciation. Inside was a delicate ring, with a sky-blue stone set in aged silver. "It's not a traditional diamond," Richard explained. "It's an aquamarine that belonged to my grandmother. I thought it would match your eyes and your spirit, clear and deep at the same time." Lucy was speechless, looking alternately at the ring and at the two expectant faces in front of her. "I'm not asking you to give up anything you've achieved," Richard continued, taking her hands in his. I'm asking to build something together, as equals. A marriage where both can grow, dream, and achieve. Michael, impatient with the delay, took the ring from the box and tried to put it on Lucy's finger, making the two adults laugh at his urgency. "Mommy, marry Chard, please," the boy asked with large, hopeful eyes that looked so much like Lucy's. How could she deny that look? How could she deny what her own heart had known for months? "Yes," she answered, as Richard helped Michael put the ring on her finger. "Yes to the house, yes to the marriage, yes to our family." Richard kissed her softly, while Michael clapped, his hands not fully understanding the meaning of the moment, but infected by the adult's joy. "New house big?" the boy asked, opening his arms to indicate size. "Not too big," Richard replied, picking him up, "but with a yard for you to play, a room just for you, and—" He looked at Lucy, as if asking permission to continue. "And maybe an extra room. For when our family grows," Lucy completed, surprising Richard. "You want—" "Not now," she clarified, "but someday. Michael deserves a brother or sister, and we deserve the chance to raise a child together, from the beginning." The house Richard had chosen was in Park Slope, a tree-lined and quiet neighborhood. It wasn't an ostentatious mansion as many would expect from the businessman, but a spacious and welcoming house with a backyard where Michael could run and play. Richard had bought the property months before, secretly renovating it bit by bit, always respecting the simple and cozy aesthetic he knew Lucy appreciated. When he took her to see the house for the first time, Lucy was moved to see that he had preserved an entire room to be her personal office and library, a space just for her, to work on school projects and study for the Masters in Education she would start the following semester. "You thought of everything," she commented, running her fingers over the empty shelves that would soon house her books. "I tried," he replied. "I wanted it to be a place where we could put down roots but without feeling limited. A starting point, not a prison." The wedding took place 3 months later in the garden of the new house. It was a small and intimate ceremony, only with close family and friends. Uncle Joe, now recovered from the stroke, insisted on walking Lucy down the improvised aisle between the chairs. Her parents, still rebuilding the relationship, sat in the front row, visibly moved. Marcy, Richard's secretary, who had become a close friend of Lucy's, personally took care of all the ceremony details. The nuns from the shelter where Lucy and Michael had stayed were also present, including Sister Connie, who blessed the couple with simple but profound words about new beginnings and second chances. Michael, dressed in a miniature suit he had insisted on wearing just like Chard's, was the ring-bearer. Halfway there, however, he stopped to greet each guest, proudly showing off the rings, making everyone laugh with his spontaneity. When he finally reached the couple, he delivered the rings and announced in a loud voice for all to hear, "Now we're a real family." The little one's words, so simple and so profound, moved everyone. Richard picked him up, and the three exchanged a hug that was worth more than any formal vow of love. Life followed its course, with the ups and downs that all families face. The Helen Montgomery Institute grew, serving more and more women. Richard expanded the construction company's social projects, focusing on dignified housing for low-income families. Michael started preschool, where he quickly stood out for his lively intelligence and natural sociability. 2 years after the wedding, on a sunny Sunday morning, Lucy woke up feeling slightly nauseous. The pharmacy test confirmed what her heart already knew: the family would soon grow. Michael's reaction to the news of a little sister's arrival was pure joy. With the peculiar wisdom of children, he didn't see the new baby as a threat, but as a gift. He spent hours talking to his mother's growing belly, telling stories and making plans for when she was born. Claire came into the world on a summer night, with the same large and curious eyes as her brother. When Michael saw her for the first time in the hospital, he asked if he could hold her. With infinite care, he sat in the armchair and Richard placed the small bundle in his arms. "Hi, Claire," he said solemnly. "I'm your brother Michael. I'll teach you everything I know." The transition to a family of 4 wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, occasional discussions born of exhaustion, moments of insecurity, but there was also a depth of joy that none of them had experienced before. the joy of building something true day by day with love and awareness. Lucy's mother, now more present in their lives, often spent entire afternoons with the grandchildren, making up for lost time. She prepared the chocolate cake that had become Michael's favorite and rocked Claire with the same lullabies she had sung to Lucy as a baby. On Michael's birthday, now 5 years old, the whole family was gathered in the backyard of the park. Slope House. Uncle Joe, now with reduced mobility, but a mind as sharp as ever, was telling stories to the children. Lucy's parents were helping serve dinner. Richard was lighting the grill, animatedly conversing with colleagues from the construction company and teachers from the institute. Lucy observed the scene from a distance when Michael came running toward her, holding a paper. "Mommy, look what I made at school today." It was a colorful drawing with 4 figures holding hands, a large one with a tie, Richard, one with long hair, Lucy, a small one in a green t-shirt, himself, and a tiny one in the arms of the long-haired figure, Claire. Above the drawing, in irregular but legible letters, he had written, "My family started with a plate of food." "What does that mean, son?" Lucy asked, intrigued. "The teacher asked us to tell how our family began. I said that Daddy gave us food when we didn't have. Any and then became our friend and then became our daddy." He shrugged, as if it were the most natural story in the world. "Uncle Joe said the best families are the ones we choose." Richard approached, curious about the conversation. "What are you two whispering about?" Lucy showed him the drawing, and Richard's eyes shone with contained tears. "You know, Michael," he said, crouching down to be at his son's height, "you're right. Our family began with a plate of food, but it grew with a lot of love." "And now it's a banquet," the boy exclaimed, opening his arms to indicate the abundance around him, not just of food, but of affection, of belonging, of second and third chances. That night, after the children were asleep, Lucy and Richard sat on the porch watching the stars over the New York sky. The city lights shone in the distance, reminding them of the night 5 years ago when their paths crossed in an elegant restaurant. "Any regrets?" Richard asked, holding her hand, the aquamarine ring still shining on her finger. "None," Lucy replied with certainty. "Each step, each challenge brought us here. Even the difficult moments were necessary. Who would have thought that such a simple gesture would change our lives forever?" she completed, resting her head on his shoulder. The silence that followed was comfortable, full of mutual understanding and gratitude for the path traveled. The gentle wind swayed the leaves of the trees in the garden, and from inside the house came the peaceful sound of the children sleeping. 2 lives that seemed destined for solitude had met at the most unexpected moment, proving that true love doesn't follow predictable scripts. Sometimes it begins with a simple gesture, a plate of food offered without judgment, a look of recognition between 2 wounded souls, a hand extended when most needed. And it grows day by day, choice after choice, until it transforms into a banquet of life and redemption. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Lucy and Richard has moved you. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring you